I, the Lord of sea and sky, I have heard my people cry, all who dwell in dark and sin, my hand will save. I who made the stars of night, I will make their darkness bright. Who will bear my light to them? Whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart.
Where it began, I can't begin to know it.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is another edition of the DPTT Speaks. Today we are talking about agriculture, and we felt that the ideal place to talk about agriculture is here in the abandoned Usine St. Madeleine factory. Ladies and gentlemen, behind me, this Usine St. Madeleine factory used to be one of the most modern sugar producing factories in the Caribbean. This was the hub of our agricultural sector, the hub of our country's source of foreign exchange for years. Common sense would dictate that if we are going to change from agriculture, from sugarcane, then we should utilize the facilities, the lands, to plant something else. We should have a plan for agriculture that must be beyond this disaster that we are looking at today. Instead, what we have is a destroyed factory. We have a wasteland. And ladies and gentlemen, there are no plans in the immediate future from either of the two major political parties to deal with agriculture and to deal with this, the Usine St. Madeleine factory. As far as your eyes can see, through these locked gates are a building, there are buildings that are abandoned, a chimney that's no longer smoking, and an agricultural sector that is in disarray. This is a true reflection of Trinidad and Tobago's agricultural sector. In spite of what people may say to you, this Usine St. Madeleine was a major agricultural initiative of the colonial government. This Usine St. Madeleine, together with the other sugarcane factories that we had throughout Trinidad and Tobago, was all part of a planned agricultural sector that we inherited from our colonial masters. Today, what we have done is shut down the factory, shut down the sugarcane industry, and put nothing in return. As we go along, you would recognize that the Caroni Plains is in abandon. We would show you how the lands have been left there unattended. Right where I am here was a train track. This is a path that the trains took laden with sugarcane, and they would come through here and go to offload their sugarcane behind me. You will see as we go along that in the very short time that Caroni Limited has been closed down, that already people have occupied the train tracks by squatting illegally on them. Ladies and gentlemen, this cannot be the way forward for agriculture. It cannot be business as usual. We cannot simply replace one government with another government that has the same vision for Trinidad and Tobago, that has the same vision for agriculture. And that vision, ladies and gentlemen, is no vision at all. Let's look at what they have done to Caroni Limited on our lands, and then look at what the Democratic Party has in store for our agricultural sector. We take you on this wonderful journey of the Democratic Party speaks and our vision for agriculture.
But then I know that it's growing strong.
This wonderful piece of real estate is left abandoned by governments. If this place is cleaned, if this place is managed properly, it can be a picnic center for families. On our way across to this lake, we were told that all of this is maintained by the CPEP company. The golf course, the waterway, all of this is kept by the CPEP company. If we are to be responsible citizens, we must ensure that when we inherit real estate like this real estate augments our water supply and augments our tourism drive. It is irresponsible of any government to allow what has happened here at Using St. Madeleine to happen at all. This should never be in this beautiful land of Trinidad and Tobago. You know, if you look around, you can see the potential for development, the potential for tourism, the potential for farming. All of this can be filled with tilapia or some other sort of freshwater fish that we can augment our fish supply. It should never be a situation where it's all filled with garbage and ill-managed. As you go along, you would recognize that a lot of the lands, the agricultural lands, are now filled with squatters. They're left for unplanned development. It's all utilized in an irresponsible manner rather than have these lands be used for agriculture. This should never have happened. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've spoken about how the agricultural sector in Trinidad and Tobago have been destroyed. We have taken a journey where by simply looking along the Solomon Hochoy Highway and looking at the abandoned lands of Caroni Limited, we've seen acres of lands that once were lush with green sugarcane plantations that are now parched, abandoned lots. We've seen acres of Caroni lands that are now areas where squatters dwell. Unplanned communities. So that they've taken the good agricultural producing lands and allowed people to go in and have unplanned communities. In other words, there are no sewer treatment plants. There are no telecommunication lines. What has happened is that you might simply have electricity supply to some of these communities, and that's the level of infrastructure. No secondary roads, no main roads, no schools. That is some of the things that the administrations of the past have allowed to happen to Caroni lands. We've looked at, as you go further down, we've looked at what has happened at the St. Madeleine factory. It's dilapidated, it's destroyed, it's falling apart. At this time, that St. Madeleine factory can very well be an environmental hazard and a hazard also for anyone that might dare to go beyond those gates. That's what we've done. The water supply in the lake is overfished. I stood there and I watched families catching very small tilapia, baby tilapia from the lake. There's absolutely no control as to what size you can fish, where you can fish. People can go in there and harm themselves. We've looked at the Caroni housing, the building that once housed the managers for Caroni Limited. Those buildings are falling apart. And we've also looked at the recreation facilities like the golf course where people can just walk on and play golf. All of this land has now been arbitrarily handed over to CPEP, so that the CPEP company controls the building. Ladies and gentlemen, how could we as a nation just sit by and look at what we inherited and have it just thrown away? How can we sit by and look at our agricultural sector being destroyed? You know, they always talk about the basic needs of man. And the first one of those is food. We are lucky in that we have some degree of foreign exchange so we can purchase food. But certainly we don't produce enough food to feed a nation. That is never an acceptable thing. How could we be happy in a land where we can't feed ourselves, but we have the land, the infrastructure necessary to feed ourselves, but we are not doing that? Imagine for a moment that those very same Caroni lands, if those Caroni lands were cultivated with pineapples, because we have had a successful pineapple industry in Trinidad and Tobago. In other words, small farmers have shown us the way that we can do a mass production of pineapples. We can do that. We can plant pineapples in the Caroni land. We can plant coconuts. There's a little section along the highway that you will see another small farmer has planted over 100 coconut trees. We can have thousands of coconut trees. We can also, another section that we looked at as we were driving down the highway, we also noticed that another farmer had goats and cattle grazing on the Caroni lands. Ladies and gentlemen, those thousands of acres of Caroni lands could be overrun with cattle and goats if we had a planned approach to agriculture. There's so many things that we can do. We can have fish farming, where we can have large-scale development in terms of farming of tilapia. We can do that. All of that we don't have right now because there's no systematic planning in our approach to agriculture. So, what is the Democratic Party of Trinidad and Tobago's plan with regards to agriculture? First of all, we're going to take back as much of that land as possible as we can to ensure that land is now going to be used for active agriculture production. A section of that land, a large section of that land, would be used for livestock, for sheep, goat, cattle. And we've also had a very, very successful experiment with what we call the buffalypso. So there's a very likely possibility after we've done all the research that you're going to have a large acres of Caroni lands dedicated to buffalypso. Another section of that Caroni lands, a large part of it, would be for our recycling plant. As we remove the betum dump from where it is, we're going to have a recycling plant somewhere in the Caroni section, in the Caroni lands. But let's go back to agriculture. Apart from livestock, we're going to choose 3 or 4 crops that can do well on those lands. So we're not sure exactly what it is. It can be potatoes, can be yams, can be cassavas in terms of ground provision. It could be pineapples, it can be avocados, it can be coconuts, but it can be citrus. But what we're saying is whatever crop we choose, we will ensure that there is enough of it to not only be self-sufficient in that crop, but there'll be a surplus for marketing. We've had some very successful stories in agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago. At one time, we had a large supply of citrus. We don't have that anymore. We were an exporter, a major exporter of cocoa and coffee. We are going to be a major exporter of cocoa and coffee again. We had a very vibrant coconut industry. We are going to have that again, so that you're going to have coconut plantations being rehabilitated. That's only some of the areas that we talked about that we know that we have had success with. We've also been very successful in the past with pigeon peas. So agriculture for us is nothing new. We've had a large-scale banana production in Trinidad and Tobago. We can do that again. But we want to go further. We want to go into areas like avocados, where we do a lot of importing of avocados. We can again perhaps now dedicate lands to avocados where we can at some point export avocados. Trinidad and Tobago is very successful in having a large variety of mangoes. There's a calypso that tells you of all the different varieties of mangoes that we have available here in Trinidad and Tobago. What I've recognized is that already we have started to import some mangoes, which we should never ever even contemplate. So we again are going to concentrate on long-scale production, where over the long term we are going to export mangoes. We're going to have enough mangoes so we can export them. So ladies and gentlemen, we have not even yet talked about tilapia in terms of large-scale production of tilapia. We have not talked about shrimp farming, and we have not talked about how do we conserve our fishing industry. Let's talk a little bit before we get to the fishing industry. Let's talk a little bit about tilapia. We've gone to the St. Madeleine Pond, or the St. Madeleine, it's like a mini lake. I've had the personal experience of having a small pond, and within a year I had over 1,000 red tilapias in that small pond. I was saying to my son when we were doing the taping that with a little bit of intervention and dedication, you can have thousands of red tilapia in that pond at the St. Madeleine site. So much so that with a few like those we can again be self-sufficient in the supply of tilapia. But not only that, we can have enough tilapia to make it fun for children and for families to go fishing. We can have that area around that pond paved so that you can walk there, and there are rails around the pond and people can stay, and there can also be sheds. In other words, you can't allow things to just fall apart. That should be a nice picnic area where families could come and fish. We can't allow the decay to continue. And it is sinful for us to go back to the election booth and stick our fingers for either of those two parties that have stood there and allowed the deterioration and decay to continue. It is sinful. Maybe not so much for us, but for our children and for the generations to come. We can't allow that to happen. you must have controls that say this is the size of fish you're allowed to catch, and if you catch something smaller than that, you should throw it back. Ladies and gentlemen, agriculture by itself, whether it's fishing, whether it's hunting, whether it's livestock rearing, whether it's the products that we do, it cannot happen arbitrarily. You know what? It's that the way we do agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago is reflective of the way we allow our country to run. Things just happen. So you get up in the morning and you walk downtown and you walk to your office and you pass the vagrant on the street. You hold your nose because the feces is right there next to him. You look at the garbage in the drain and you go into your air-conditioned office and you just ignore it. And you hope that one day it will disappear. But it doesn't. It just grows. And if one vagrant becomes 4 vagrants, and 4 vagrants become 10 vagrants. And then when someone like Barack Obama or the President of the United States or somebody else is coming, you take all the vagrants and you hide them away from the public. And as soon as that is gone, they come back out so we can say, that's who we are. We live among the filth. That's what we have when we elect these 2 major parties. And I tell you something. The reason why they remain there, the reason why our agricultural sector has been allowed to fall apart and we continue to vote for these 2 political parties is one reason and one reason only. Not because they have a plan for agriculture, not because they love our country. The only reason this is so is because we think that it's somewhere in the back of our head, in the back of our minds, that we have an obligation to vote for someone that looks like us. So because of our ethnicity, and that alone, these 2 political parties have a stranglehold on Trinidad and Tobago and on our citizens. This cannot happen. This cannot be allowed to continue over the long term. So, the Democratic Party is saying that as we change the agricultural sector, as we decide on the crops that we're going to rear, as we decide on what we're going to do with our colony lands, we also have to look at how we market our products, where we take them, the packaging. All that is a holistic view for agriculture. And we're asking you to do your part. Your responsibility is to go to your neighbor, to your friend, to the people at your workplace, to let them know that the Democratic Party of Trinidad and Tobago is the only option. You see, I have to tell you about this because I believe that there's a systematic approach to ensure you don't get this message. When we launched this 2015 campaign, we invited every media house in Trinidad and Tobago. We provided snacks for them. And we said, listen, this is an exciting time for 2015 election. The Democratic Party is launching its 2015 campaign. When we got there, there were 2 media houses. There was IETV and Trinidad Guardian. 2. And I wondered, why is it? Why is it with a country with over 30 radio stations? And why is it in a country where there's so many newspapers and so many television stations that when a political party is launching a campaign, you only have 2 persons? I read today on the newspaper and I'm seeing people talking about options and third parties. And I see nothing about the Democratic Party. Now, this is the Democratic Party that is a party that was formed since 2002. With the exception of the UNC and the PNM, no other party in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, I think Citizens Alliance was the only other one that might have had close to, if as much, involvement in the politics of Trinidad and Tobago. But no other political party by themselves, and well, I must say also the COP. But in terms of third parties, there's no other political party in Trinidad and Tobago that has a vision, that contests the election, and that continues to write every day. I write in the newspaper every week for the last 10 years about the vision for the Democratic Party of Trinidad and Tobago. So we've always been there. But yet nobody hears about us. Why? Because I believe that because we talk sense, because we are saying to you and we're going to appeal to your heart and mind about where we ought to be as a country, they don't want this message out. And I believe there's a deliberate effort to keep the Democratic Party away from you. That is why we are on YouTube. That's why we are on Facebook. That's why we are on Instagram. Because we want to get to you, to say to you, this is the future for Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm asking you to spread the word, to talk to your friends, to talk to your family, to let them know that the symbol for going forward is the hibiscus and the hummingbird. That symbol of Trinidad and Tobago is what's going to take us out from this rut that we are in. That's going to revitalize our tourism, revitalize our agricultural sector, change our infrastructure, look at the way we police ourselves, make this country live up to its full potential. Share the word, speak to someone, let them know that the DPTT, the Democratic Party of Trinidad and Tobago, is the only way. And the way you can ensure that this gets to the wider population, the way we can get on television and on radio stations, is if you contribute, if you say, I want to do my part, and take a little 5 cents or a little 10 cents or whatever you have and donate it to the Democratic Party's initiative to share the vision for Trinidad and Tobago. Until next time, this is Steve Alvarez, the political leader of the Democratic Party of Trinidad and Tobago on DPTT Speaks, saying, see you in the next episode of the DPTT.